Okay, thanks everyone again for joining us today. We're really excited that we got such a good attendance. So lots of schools interested to see how they can access low-cost renewable power through Flow Power. Firstly, I'll just do some housekeeping. So we're aiming for this session to run for about 45 minutes. That'll be half an hour for the presentation, and then we'll have 15 minutes for discussion and questions at the end. If you do have any questions, please just hold on to them until the end, and then there'll be an opportunity for you to send those through. At the end of the presentation, we'll also be sending out the slides and a recording at the end, so that'll go around to everybody that registered for the webinar. I better introduce myself. So my name is Jacob. I'm part of the account management team here at Flow Power, and I've also got Trish from the business development team with me as well. Cool.
Hi everyone.
Thanks, Trish. So yeah, I'm just going to run through some generic information about Flow Power itself, and then we'll talk more specifically about how some of the products that we have available, particularly with our renewable energies, that can benefit some of the schools that we're working with and hope to work with in the future. So Flow Power are a licensed wholesale electricity retailer. In saying that, we do things a little bit differently to your basic fixed price retailers that many of you are probably familiar with. And the aim of what we're trying to do is to really reshape how Australian businesses engage with their energy, particularly in that renewable energy space. So we aim on giving customers full transparency into pricing and opportunities that exist within that retail space. So in 2007, Flow Power actually launched the first corporate renewable power purchasing agreement, which allowed businesses to tap into low-cost, long-term renewable power directly with large-scale wind and solar projects across the national energy market. It was just last week, actually, that we announced the businesses that signed up in 2018 to our first PPA with the Ararat Wind Farm, collectively saved over $14 million, and a really great outcome considering that was our first one, and it wasn't actually that many businesses that signed up in that point of time, so really good value for all of those customers. We also announced that we reached our goal of having both wind and solar in every mainland NEM state. So yeah, everywhere where the energy market is deregulated in Australia, we actually have both wind and solar available for our customers. A little bit more about us. We are backed by OP Trust, who are a $20 billion Canadian pension fund. Their support gives us the agility to flex with our customers' needs and also adopt to new technology as it emerges. You are most likely familiar with some of our larger customers, lots of them being familiar household names. Brands like Snack Brands, Pernod Ricard, who are famous for Jacobs Creek wine, Olam Orchids, and an Australian vintage, just to name a few of them there. So just to kick off, this is what we'll be running through today. I'm going to run through some information about the energy market itself, a little bit more about our power purchasing agreements with renewable energy generators, turning energy into an opportunity, and then we'll run through how you guys can get involved and just answer any questions that you might have. Okay, so as many of you probably have seen on the news, the Australian energy market is undergoing some pretty fundamental change. That's driven by huge increases in pricing, largely because of the closure of coal-fired generators, and we also have a lot of investment in renewable energy sources. So the grid is changing. As the energy supply system transitions to a more integrated and cleaner system, it's impacting how businesses will choose to procure their energy as well. So at the forefront of this transition are a lot of businesses that are connecting to power market signals by opting to pay the spot price, which is a variable price, being a wholesale retailer. That is what we focus on. And also procuring long-term energy contracts called corporate renewable power purchasing agreements. So these are directly with wind and solar farms on longer-term contracts. So in 2018, we did see a large influx of renewables looking to replace some of the coal generation that was lost in 2017 when Hazelwood was closed. The Clean Energy Council recently released a report that provides a snapshot on renewable energy by state in Australia. And what this highlighted was that renewables are now available and a very cost-effective way of procuring your energy for a business. The only problem with that is lots of businesses procuring energy isn't necessarily a core part of their business, and that's where we step in to go and sign those PPAs directly with renewable generators, solar farms and wind farms, and then to help smaller companies access that directly. So I'm going to pass over to Trish now to talk about how this can be used, how this information can be used by schools.
Thanks, Jacob. So over the last few years, many people procuring electricity, particularly for schools, the business managers, have noticed pretty significant increases in their bills. I mean, that's across the board in all industries, but we're talking about schools today. And what Flow Power bring to the market are currently different ways to access electricity in the way that you procure to get some value. So talking to schools, obviously there are a few things that they're looking for, which is lower energy costs, some long-term price certainty. Quite a few of everyone that we've spoken to had quite a lot of bill shock coming out of signing their 3-year agreements and facing the prices that they're seeing in the market today. And one really big driver has been driving towards better sustainability outcomes and taking up opportunities around that, which we'll go into a little bit more. So how will we help drive these opportunities? So particularly speaking to procuring energy through a renewable corporate PPA, we can help lower your overall business expenditure by lowering your electricity bills. You can budget for the future still. So whilst we're talking about a flexible price that changes a little bit more, even though you might pay a little more in summer, you'll pay a lot less in winter, and the balance at the end is actually just even on the wholesale spot, it's typically performed better than retail rates. And meeting sustainability commitments. So one of the strongest ways to vote with your dollar towards the energy transition is to support a renewable generator, and this is one way for schools to do that. Whereas once upon a time, a corporate PPA was really only accessible by big energy users using 50 and 100 gigawatt hours a year, whereas schools will typically use anywhere between 300 megawatt hours and maybe 2 gigawatt hours at its biggest. So for us, it's about bringing some equality and allowing smaller organisations to vote with their dollar and access these sustainability opportunities and these savings. And they want to display their commitment to students by supporting the development of renewable power sources. So this is one really big way to do it. So a little bit more on what we've done as a business to facilitate this process is as Jacob said, we've procured renewables in each state, in each NEM state, both wind and solar. And we can basically divide the offtakes for these up into little pieces so smaller businesses can access them. And I'll let Jacob talk to some of the results we've achieved so far just in the 1 year of offering this renewable.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, we did help our first customers that started with what was literally a groundbreaking deal when we first signed a PPA with Ararat Wind Farm, and have signed up around 7 to 8 businesses in that first round who had really great results, some larger corporates. Since then, we've signed a number of more PPAs throughout Australia, in Queensland, South Australia, New South Wales and Victoria, and signed a lot more companies up to these renewable energy deals. However, yeah, the results speak for themselves with, in that first year alone, saving our customers over $14 million. But yeah, and across a number of sectors as well. So it hasn't been just brought to any single sector. We've done this for manufacturing, local councils, universities, schools as well. So we already have some schools that are taking advantage of these PPAs that we've arranged.
So let's talk a little more on the PPA and what that means. If you're not familiar with the term, it's a power purchase agreement, and what that is basically setting up a relationship direct to the generator to say, I'll buy energy from you if you build this plant. So that underpins the investment in our grid and in renewables in our grid, and these particular agreements help these plants to stand up and proliferate, which is what we want to see in the energy transition. So how does it work? Basically, a renewable project, a wind or a solar project, will go and try and seek funding and loans. And before they do that, they need to prove a business case. And one of the pieces of that is by having customers. So what we do is or if you're a really big organization, is you can go directly to these generators and say, I'll buy a certain amount of your energy. And then they can then take that to their investors and say, here are some customers that are going to buy from us. Can we build it? So that basically helps us proliferate renewables in that way, in a really direct way. So when you sign up for a PPA, you create revenue certainty for the project. You provide community support and jobs in that area, in that region, because they're typically in rural areas. And contracting generation reduces their cost of capital. How is it a win for schools? Buying direct from a generator is like going to wholesale. It's kind of like going to Costco and going and purchasing something in volume, and that results in cheaper rates, so reduced energy costs. It also can provide you with long-term price certainty. So one of the key things in a PPA is you want a long time horizon for your asset, and schools are perfect for that. They can really lend that model to accessing these reduced energy costs because they expect to be around for a while. So they can then get some long-term price certainty. Industry leadership, schools have always shown leadership in sustainability and invested in business cases, often first adopters. They really proliferated solar behind the meter, rooftop solar, and just to both get cheaper energy and to show the students that they are looking into the future and supporting that more renewables. And then also connecting sustainability programs to wind and solar farms. So that's a really exciting piece for us, which I'll talk to more later. But what that means is the school can show some additionality. That means that you're directly linked with one solar and one wind farm, depending on your profile. And you can actually go on school excursions there. You'll get data directly from that wind and solar farm, generation data, which you can then which you can feed into your STEM programs. You can feed into a sustainability program. And then also report on, so that you can show how you're really driving towards sustainability. We've seen in recent times, and also not so recent, that students are really keyed into climate change and issues around that, and they're really trying to lend their voice to that, and this is one way schools can show support. So there's a few ways that schools have accessed renewables, and they've done that in a really big way through on-site generation. Again, schools for a long time were leading the commercial and industrial installation of solar with very large solar installations wherever they could, and that helped them lower their costs. And PPAs are a really, really good dovetail into the rest of their generation, because typically schools can't fit enough solar on their roofs, or there's not enough land to cover their whole load. So a PPA can cover the rest of their load with renewable generation. And Jacob can talk more on the offsite generation and how a virtual generation agreement can support your existing solar so that you can move towards 100% renewables.
Yeah, so thanks, Trish. I mean, there's a lot of perks with the offsite renewables. I mean, some of you are probably familiar with on-site PPAs, which is basically there's a lot of providers out there that will offer that. Flow Power are one of those as well, that will offer on-site generation, where we will essentially finance the project to build some solar on site, and then the school itself or business itself can purchase that energy. It has a lot of perks because you are offsetting your on-site electricity consumption, which is quite expensive. You're paying your network charges, your market charges, and your energy charges. So being able to offset all of those costs with an on-site generator is really helpful. And it also has all those positive environmental impacts that Trish was speaking about as well. The only problem, not that it's necessarily a problem or where that we can help with our offsite generators, is that you can't always fit enough solar on your site to cover your load. You can also benefit from wind generation. Typically, you're not able to build any wind farm or wind generations on a school or other business. So that is a really great perk, because when you've got the combination of wind and solar, you get a flatter generation profile. You're getting wind when it's not sunny, you're getting sun when it's not windy. So you get a better match to your actual load itself. And that's something that Flow Power put a lot of work into as well, taking a company's specific load profile. In the case of schools, obviously that's quite heavy throughout the day, so obviously solar can help a lot there. But also not using a lot of energy during summer when solar's peaking. So our goal is to always minimise the export and make sure that schools are maximising as much of that energy as possible to use as much as we can. And we've got a very experienced analytics team that will try and match your consumption perfectly with some offsite generation.
Yeah, so that's, and I want to talk a little bit to the structure of different PPAs. So you'll see on the screens that you've got a financial PPA and a virtual generation agreement. A lot of business managers and a lot of people that we speak to will ask, well, what's the difference? A financial PPA is a direct agreement with the generator, and you'll usually have to balance the cash flows internally in your accounts team. And it's quite a complex legal process to run through it, and typically you need a much larger volume of capacity or a lot more consumption at your site to access one of these. So it's quite complex. What we've done at Flow Power is we've created a virtual generation agreement, which is essentially a supply-linked PPA. And what that means is you can use your standard electricity procurement process to access a PPA, so that on your next round of signing your new electricity agreements, you can actually buy direct from a generator at the volumes that you have. And it's a much simpler agreement. So typically a PPA agreement's 123 pages. A virtual generation agreement is basically a 14-page addendum to an existing electricity supply agreement, which you'll all be familiar with. So that's another way we've simplified access to this opportunity. So talking a little more on more strategically around energy and schools. Schools have already invested so much in their students, particularly, and for business managers, the opportunities to make savings and drive sustainability improvements have been realised through on-site solar, many lighting upgrades and other energy efficiency strategies, improved building envelope and better building management system controls. Then there's the other portion of your energy that you want to cover or improve or reduce the carbon footprint of, and basically a PPA has been created for that portion of your energy. You can use offsite wind to cover your carbon consumption on one portion, and offsite solar for the rest that you can't fit on site. So it's one piece of your energy strategy. It's much broader than that, and there's a lot more detail. But in terms, if we're talking about trying to reduce your carbon footprint and consumption of electricity, the PPA is a really nice piece for that and could cover off quite a large portion of your energy. So coming back to engagement with your energy, and I guess the thing that underpins Flow Power and in trying to interface with your energy differently, schools are a really great piece for that. That little black box that you see there is a K-Watch controller, and it's basically a K-Watch intelligent. It's a K-Watch intelligent controller actually, and you can use it. We use it to monitor and meter your energy so that you'll get live data feeds, both in terms of your consumption, in terms of the energy price and the weather, and what the generators are doing. So that piece is really interesting, and we can feed that live data using this piece of equipment, which comes with all of our electricity agreements. You can use this intelligent controller to access the data and feed that into your STEM division and into your reporting to understand better how you use your energy, and you can interface with it better. So it'll drive investment. So it allows more schools to reach their sustainability targets, be more engaged with the way that you use carbon. And I know a lot of schools have TVs around, and you can actually feed live data into there, and maybe a STEM. I've heard of schools using their STEM division using Raspberry Pi to create little avatars that tell you how much carbon you're abating. It's a really nice piece of equipment that allows you to connect something as simple as electricity procurement with another value stream, and that is engaging your students. It's something really exciting. We can also facilitate site excursions to the wind and solar farms and really get the kids engaged. So there's a few more things that you can access. So a few of you are probably wondering how the procurement process works. We can run alongside a standard procurement exercise that you're doing. Typically, what we've done is we've worked with both directly with business managers to provide them with analysis and business cases, or sometimes there's a consultant that's doing fee-for-service work and they're analysing all the different options, so that's quite valuable as well. And we provide some numbers on what you might look like on a wind and solar PPA and on your energy consumption, and that's a nice education process in itself, because you'll get a better understanding of how you use electricity and how the PPA can fit into that. So that's a one-on-one conversation. We try and understand your needs, and then we build you a offer that suits that. Step 2, you review your proposal, evaluate the savings, compare them to other things you're looking at. And then once you're all set up and the renewable generation starts, hopefully that coincides at the same time as your K-Watch controller starts, and you start getting your energy feed. It's important to note that the electrons you get from the grid will all be the same. It doesn't matter whether the sun's shining or the wind's blowing, you'll always get electricity. There's no risk to your supply in this. And then our accounts team, led by Jacob here, will then report the benefits to you and what's happening at your wind and solar farms.
Okay, so the last thing we'll run through today before we get into some questions, just a quick case study about a school that's taken advantage of this offer. So David's a business manager for an independent secondary school. It's come the time for him to run his tender. The contract's obviously coming up. He needs to look at a new way to buy power and avoid the rising costs, which I'm sure many of you are facing as well. So he gets in contact with us to understand how he can access wind and solar, and what he can do differently to better access energy. So David gets in contact with us. The students and school is committed to achieving its sustainability targets. So that's why they've taken a different approach. Okay, so we've had a look at his power. That's what I was referring to before, when we were actually looking specifically how the school uses energy and when they're using that energy. In the case of David, we were able to get that close to 90% of his consumption to be covered by wind and solar. So it's a significant portion that, as Trish is saying, will allow the school to focus on sustainability and educate the students. But in addition to that, is also providing a pretty massive cost benefit as well. So just to run through this last bit, so total savings, as we said, in 2018 across the companies that signed on to renewable PPAs, they collectively saved $14 million. Now, from memory, it was close to 30% reduction in their costs throughout 2018. It's reducing their carbon footprint, and not only theirs, but the carbon footprint of Australia. So really getting in on that sustainability angle. Provide some price certainty. Obviously, we've seen some huge fluctuations in energy prices in the last 2 or 3 years in Australia. So this does provide some really long-term and good pricing as well for the next 5 to 10 years. And finally, as Trish was speaking about before, involving the students and educating the students on renewable energy generation, sustainability. So that's all part of that model as well. So yeah, next steps, if you want to get in touch, please give us a call on that number. One of our staff will be happy to talk to you about it. All right, so we'll just open this up to questions. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you should have a drop-down arrow that says questions. If you just want to fill in anything you'd like to ask in there, and Trish and I will be able to answer that for you. Okay, so we've got a question here. So the first one is, what happens when the wind and sun aren't generating? Is there enough power, and is the school still going to be in operation? So the first answer to that is definitely yes. You're still going to be receiving energy 24/7. All the electricity you use will still come from the grid. The wind and solar is essentially just matching against your load. But yeah, you'll always have electricity available. In the case of the case study earlier, where we mentioned that 90% of the wind and solar is covering the load, in the interim, you would just be purchasing electricity as you usually would.
So I've got a question here. Can any schools sign these deals? Absolutely, where the energy is procured via the business manager. And as long as you're using more than, I would say, 500 megawatt hours a year, and we can do that analysis for you if you like, if you want to give us a call. But basically, any schools that are using energy that procure their own energy, so government schools will be a bit different, although we can service government and councils as well. But in this case, talking non-government schools, yes, any schools can sign up for a PPA. So you would just follow that normal process, engage us, grab a proposal, and then talk to one of our consultants, and they'll walk you through and show you what it means for your school.
Okay, so we've got a few coming through as well now. So 30% cost savings, I see one question with no capital outlay, question mark. So yeah, that was real savings last year through 2018, where we were seeing customers that sign on to these VGAs save up to 30%. Now there's no financial capital outlay. There will potentially be a security deposit that is a request of the wind and solar farm, which is a portion of the contract. However, compared to the outcomes, it's not really significant at all. Trish, do you want to have a go at including storage in your PPAs?
Yes, absolutely. So it depends on if we're talking storage at the generator or storage on site, both very beneficial. So few of our generators that we have agreements with are looking at adding, so some of our wind farms are considering adding solar and storage, and some of our customers, not all schools, but actually mostly other businesses using more, they are installing batteries on site or doing the business cases around them, and it's hugely beneficial to firm up your energy rate. Because this is a supply linked with a wholesale supply linked PPA, there will be some variance to some varying bills depending on the time of year again, but at the end of the year we would expect you to wash out better than standard retail. And having storage is always beneficial in terms of really coming at an energy strategy and really building up that energy resilience of your site.
And that can be used to go 100% renewable as well.
Oh.
So if you're getting coverage of say 70 to 90% from wind and solar, depending on when you use your electricity, we can help implement some strategies so that when there is no wind or there's no solar off-site for you guys, you can activate your on-site storage so that at all times you are using renewable energy.
So I've got a question about the tender process and how we would run the tender process. So if you're procuring a lot of energy a year and you might need to run a tender process, we would recommend that you go with a consultant. Not so much, we don't usually recommend brokers because they will just they'll often build their fees into your bills. So that's legitimate. But in terms of if you're looking for more interesting solutions that are really going to bolster your energy strategy and provide you with solutions that really help you with your energy strategy moving into the future and wanting to support your students, not just trying to get the cheapest price, but you can access cheaper prices through a PPA as well. But we would recommend that you use a consultant. And there are a number of excellent consultants out there that will actually go and do the numbers for you in detail and do the analysis and future projections. And that's a very legitimate and proven way to access a PPA without it costing too much.
There's another one in here which I think is more of a statement, but it's a good one. I think they're a current customer as well, and they look pretty excited about the excursion. So we might have to get ready to organise some of those. I think they've suggested we could use FaceTime as well. So maybe that's something we could think about. And
another event that we had run last year was was called Run Like the Wind at one of our wind farms, and it was a marathon or a short marathon that we had a few attendees to.
Okay, we've got here, when is the best time to sign a corporate PPA? I can answer that one. So, I mean, really, at the moment is a really good time for a couple reasons. The current price of electricity is really high, so offsetting that with the benefits you get from a corporate PPA, it's better to do that sooner rather than later. The other thing is that they're available at the moment, and there's not really any certainty that they will always be available. Eventually, we're going to have built enough wind and solar in Australia, and these PPAs just won't be around anymore, because typically the generators do want to sign them at the start of their life, which is happening over the next, this year and next year and last year as well. So while you don't necessarily need to do it today, the sooner you can do it, the better the outcome.
Next question, accessing the data through the K-Watch controller, how does that work? So there are a lot more sophisticated people than me that can answer a technical question like that, but basically, I'll give it a crack. It's like a meter that reads your energy feeds and pulls in data from that the generators are producing, and it's constantly available through the Bureau of Meteorology, and then they can push that data into the classroom or into your STEM division. And you can then work with that data to engage your students. There are also some really excellent pedagogical curriculum services that you can get around renewables and sustainability. If you want to know who they are, you can email me. But there are some really good sources of both data and information that you can feed into your STEM division or in your sustainability division. So a lot of schools have a year 11 or 12 program where they want to leave a mark on the school, and one way to do it is through a sustainability discussion, and that topic's only getting more and more, only moving higher and higher on the priority list of students in terms of what they want to be engaged with.
Yeah, and we're able to get that live data as well. So you can log on to, if you become a Flow Power customer, you'll get access to our portal, and in that portal we can give you live access to the wind data for a wind farm that you're signed up to, as well as solar farms. So that can definitely be incorporated into the classroom as well. All right, so thanks for all of your questions. If you do have any more, where are we sending those to? So I'll get in touch on that number that we had on the screen earlier. Feel free to give us a call and we'll answer any of your questions.